everyone. Welcome to the Future Focused Learning Podcast, where we explore the intersection of technology and education and strive to answer the big question, how do we prepare students for the future? I'm your host, Kyla Bolden, and I'm the founder and CEO of WizKid Learning and WKL Academy. Each episode, we bring you insightful conversations with educators, industry leaders, and change makers who are transforming learning environments and equipping students with skills they need to thrive in an ever-evolving world. And just in case this is the first time you're ever hearing of WizKid Learning, WKL Academy, myself, or this podcast, especially because it's new, I want to give you a little overview of what we do at our company. So we are really passionate about preparing students for the future. So that looks like developing and delivering really cutting edge coding programs, workforce development programs, technical programs that prepare students to actually succeed for the jobs, the workforces that they're actually going to be entering into. So in practice, what we do is we partner with organizations and schools and government agencies to provide turnkey technical and future focused programs to their students. So that looks like K through 12. So we partner with elementary schools, middle schools, high schools, and organizations that support those age groups of students. And then we also do really incredible workforce development programs for teens and young adults. And this looks like getting them cybersecurity certifications, teaching them how to be software developers, AI courses, really all the skills that they're going to be needing to know in order to be leaders in the field that they're entering into. And that is why I am so excited to introduce our second guest to the podcast, because she has a long history of really doing exactly what we're trying to do at WizKid Learning and WKL Academy, but in different formats. So Emma Asiedu-Akrofi, she is currently the CEO at Fora Network for Change, and she was the executive director at Jean Augustine Center for Young Women Empowerment, which is where I first met Emma years ago. It's actually really fitting that she is our second guest, as our first guest was the Dean of Students and the principal for Adelphia Christian Academy, which is the first school that we worked with. And Jean Augustine Center for Young Women Empowerment was one of the first organizations that WizKid Learning ever worked with over 8 years ago. So I really hope you guys enjoyed this episode. I definitely enjoyed catching up with Emma. We talk a lot about gender equity and why it is so important to promote it, not just in the workspace, but throughout programming in general. We talk a little bit about our experiences as well as women in the impact-focused space. And we also give some advice for young learners and young women who are entering the workforce on how they could best set themselves up for success. So I really hope you guys like this episode, and thanks for listening. Thank you so much for joining me on the podcast today. I think we spoke a little bit beforehand about what we're trying to do at Future Focused Learning, but the goal is to speak with individuals like you in the youth development space to learn a little bit more about how they are helping youth and younger people actually be successful in the future. So just to start off with, can you introduce yourself a little bit and tell us what you do?
For sure. And let me say thank you for having me. And it's a pleasure. I know we've known each other for a few years in another capacity, another organization, but it's nice to reconnect. So to introduce myself, my name is Emma Asiedu-Akrofi. Pronouns are she, her. I always start my introductions by saying I'm a Ghanaian Canadian woman. Born in Canada, but very much raised by Ghanaian parents in a Ghanaian environment. So I really appreciate both sides of my identity. And I, for the most part, have really fallen in love with and into this space of gender equity and youth advocacy. And it's a space that I've worked in for many years now. And outside of that, like just on a personal level, I'm in Toronto. And I love Toronto in the summer. So I'm big on festivals and brunches and being outdoors and walks and all that stuff. In the winter, I'm a little bit more hibernate. I hibernate a little more. Still trying to get into the winter sports, but it's a goal of mine. So
Yeah, I think as Canadians in general, the summer is amazing. Toronto in the summer is wonderful. Toronto in the winter, it seems like it lasts 10 months, and you kind of try to make friends with your plans with your friends, and they're like, oh, let's do this in 3 months or whatever, because it's so cold. So I definitely feel that. And so I know, as you said, we've known each other for a while. Our company, WizKid Learning, actually did programs with the Gene Augustine Center when you were at it. And this was years and years ago. And I've always admired your work in the youth development space. And I know, like most of us who have found ourselves here, this wasn't always the space that we had planned to go into, right? So I know when you were in university, you were thinking about, I think, being a lawyer. And tell me a little bit more about how you found yourself to the position you are in today.
Mhm. I feel like I happily fell into it. There was no plan. This was not planned at all. Again, coming from, I think it's mainly any immigrant African. I'll say I speak from Ghanaian first, but first and foremost, but any like people, many parents, they want their children to be doctors, lawyers, accountants, engineers. Those are the big four. And so I was like, okay, I'm gonna do law. I'm gonna be a lawyer. My brother's a lawyer, and then like I always had a love of reading and writing, and so went to school, realized no, I like that but not on that level. Like it's a little too intense. It's not exactly where I want to go. So found my way through school, and then really just got the first job I could, as you're probably aware, which through my other information is that I fell into insurance. And kudos to those who loved insurance, but it wasn't for me. It wasn't for me. I like people. Like I like connecting. I've always been someone who enjoys people and seeing the direct and seeing impact, right? Like I can't just be about the bottom dollar and paper pushing. It has to be meaningful. It has to be meaningful work for me. And so with that, I really started my career in the nonprofit charitable sector, navigating my way through it, being at the YMCA. I was able to use transferable skills like that I gained in insurance to get a job in risk management at the YMCA. So went to the charity, but wasn't doing the work that I wanted to do, which was really be more connected to the participants in the communities that we were serving. But I did the risk management and insurance work for the Y and policy work, and was able to do other things outside of the scope of my role. Through that, I really just started to like that's how I started to get into this space through volunteering. And then I was able to come across a job for a phenomenal organization. It was very grassroots. It still is grassroots, but the Gene Augustine Center for Young Women's Empowerment, which the organization is founded by the Honorable Dr. Jean Augustine, who is the first Black woman in Parliament. She's done so much. You know, she was Fairness Commissioner, a teacher, principal. Like I could spend the interview speaking to her accomplishments, but she founded the Jean Augustine Center, and they were looking for an executive director, and I applied, and then the rest was history 7 years later. So that's really how I don't want to say stumbled, but just, how I entered into this world.
Yeah, and that's such an interesting story. And I think a story that I hear a lot about how, a lot of us thought maybe we'll be going into a lot of these more, I guess, like corporate careers. I know for myself, I had planned to study law and get my JD MBA. That was always the plan. And I was really passionate about doing that. I was going to go into consulting. And I just happened to, my consulting internship got canceled the summer before my senior year of university. And I was like, I need to figure out what to do. So I kind of like dug into, okay, what was I passionate about? And that kind of helped birth the start of WizKid Learning. But I think it's always really important as we think about like even our career journeys. And I tell our students that you have to figure out like your why and how you want to impact the world. And then ultimately, sometimes opportunities for that, it happens early in your career. Sometimes it takes like a few moving around. But if you keep that why at the center of what you do, it will find you, right? So I love your story so much. And like, I want to ask about your childhood a bit. do you think there were any things that happened during your childhood or things that you experienced or noticed about the world that made you really want to focus on like gender equity or even just like the youth development space?
That's a great question. And yes, I definitely. I feel like I'm going to refer back to my culture and identity a lot within this, but it really it did inform the lens I take with gender equity. Like I love my culture, I love being Ghanaian, I love being African woman, but in terms of gender equity, it's not balanced. I have an older brother, and so I saw that growing up, right? Like how boys are taken more seriously. One being he was older and he's a male, so boys being taken more seriously, or males, I should say, being taken more seriously. My voice not being as heard or as respected, not only within the household but within the general community. Young women were expected to be in the kitchen, taking on those traditional roles of helping to cook, clean, and as you get older, marry, have raised children, where males were given more opportunities to really pursue education, to pursue tasks outside the opportunities outside of the home, really develop in other ways that were seen as not traditional to young women. So that really informed the lens about what is equity, like what is equity or equality, and how could I not only create that myself, but also be part of contributing to that for the broader world, or the systems that create these unequal opportunities for young women and gender marginalized youth.
And we see that a lot, gender equity is something that we're really passionate about at WizKid Learning for many, many reasons, but also just because, tech drives this world. There's only a few groups of people that typically don't look like you and me who are actually creating the technology. So how can the world be created more equitably for our communities if, there's not enough people that look like us actually creating tech, right? And it's really interesting that, and I love that you're so informed by your culture and how you've been able to bring that into what you do today. Because I think when it comes to a lot of us who are, I guess, like working on these like UN sustainable goals, whether it's like gender equality or like lack of education, etc., our childhood and our culture does play an important part in why we do what we do today. And I think even being in whether it's the nonprofit space or the business space, gender equity is something that obviously we've been fighting for a long time, but we're still so far from where we need to be. And it's interesting being very informed about it because you see it all the time in every aspect of business and I like the world, and it's hard to not become discouraged because, when you're so informed about it, it could be easy to be like, oh my gosh, like this is impossible. This is how are we even going to get to a remotely okay place in this? But I think part of that is trying to create opportunities for young women, especially as well as changing even the discussion around gender equity and gender equality and just thinking about it, and this is more something that I'm just curious because I don't know. When we talk about the difference between gender, like equity, equality, like using those verbiages, is there a preferred one rather than like equity versus equality?
Yeah, so definitely, I would say equity. Equity
Yeah.
takes into consideration all the intersectionalities of
Hmm.
people. And so, what can we do recognizing intersectionalities? So, recognizing that me as a Black woman might not have the same opportunities as a white woman. And
Hmm.
so, how do we create opportunities to level the playing field so that everyone, so some might need a little bit more support than others, so that everyone has at least an equal amount of opportunities to pursue whatever they see fit, or whatever they want to pursue in life. And
Yeah.
so that really is it. Equity really takes into consideration the intersectionalities of race, gender as well, since that's what we're
Hmm.
speaking about: gender, race, ability, socioeconomic status. All those considerations are applied to an equity focused lens, whereas equality is really just like, okay, we balance the scales, women make the same amount as men,
Yeah.
and then that's it. But not recognizing that within that group of women or gender marginalized individuals, there's other variables that need to be considered.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's super important to take into account just intersectionality in general, especially when it comes to education and programming and things like that. I think it's often not taken into as account as it should be. I want to ask you a little bit about your role at Fora, and tell me a little bit more about that because I know that's what you're focused on now, and you guys do a lot to promote gender equity when it comes to young women. So tell me a little bit more about that.
Sure, I'm happy to share more about Fora. And so I'll start with saying that I still feel fairly new to Fora. I
Mhm.
recently joined in November as their chief executive officer. So it's been a great journey. I've lost track of the months. I think that's 8 months now. So
Yeah.
not yet a year.
Mhm.
And so to share a little bit about the work that we do at Fora Network for Change. First, let me say we used to be called Girls 20. So if anyone
Okay.
is familiar, they might know us as Girls 20. And then to be more inclusive of our gender marginalized youth, a few years ago, we changed our name to Fora Network for Change. And then since then, we've also changed some of our programming to also be more inclusive of those. So really removing that focus on just girls to more young women and gender marginalized youth. So what we do is really we advocate for young women and gender marginalized youth to get into decision making spaces. So we think young people have the answers or are part of answering all these issues and concerns or in this world. So we really want to advocate for them to be into decision making spaces to change the way things have been done. We know that traditionally, historically, major decisions from a systemic level and also from a small like from a within an organizational level are usually white males, baby boomers. They're the ones that you see at the head of those tables, but we recognize that young people, especially those between the ages of 18 to 30, bring so much value to the table. So we want to be able to provide them with the training, the networks, the skills, and the access to get into those decision making spaces. Especially in particular those spaces of power. So like within our organization, we have two key programs. One is called Rise on Boards, which really provides it's a national program across Canada that provides young people 18 to 30 with training, networks, skill building, and then we place them on a board of directors for a year. So it's a board of their choosing, which so I think that's phenomenal because the young people come in with passion. They're like climate change, gender equity, education, and we really strive to find a board that fits their interests, and we place them on that. And we know by placing young people on boards, it provides them with experience that they can lived experience because they get to operate on a board. As well, it provides them with access to education and training, as well as it's great for a resume for career advancement and also for social impact. So there's so many benefits to joining a board for a young person. The other program we do is our global program because we do operate globally as well. So we have a program called the Global Summit, which I haven't experienced firsthand, like the in-person Global Summit, since I'm fairly new, but anyone who speaks about this and all our programs, they literally say how impactful and life-changing it has been for them. And so what the program does is we bring 30 young people every year together from around the world. Like if you joined one of our calls, it's just phenomenal to see so many young people from around the world logging in and connecting, and we help them to advance their social impact initiatives. So they come with whatever social cause they want to champion, and we provide them with training and skill building again. And then we provide them with coaches and mentors. And then very excitingly, now we're going to be giving micro granting. So on top of giving them all these skill building opportunities, we know money talks, right? Like you really need money to do this work. So we're going to be able to provide micro grants for them to pursue this work in the future. And so those are the two programs. But outside of that, another thing we're really big on is advocacy. So we do a lot of youth advocacy and gender equity advocacy. Most recently, we had a research report that went out that really examined it was called the Young Feminist Economy, and it was really what would the world look like if we really centered young women and gender marginalized youth, if we considered them as we were developing like strategies and laws and opportunities around the economy. Like what does that look like if we really supported young people in terms of their postgraduate and finding jobs, the care economy? There's so many factors that we know, especially within this world right now with the recession and inflation, that young people have their hands tied because life is expensive and they're not adequately supported in a lot of these areas. So we really want to re-examine and provide suggestions on how to support young people moving forward.
Well, first of all, what Fora does is really awesome. I especially love how you talked about the global forum, right? I think it's so rare for especially young people to be able to connect with people all over the world that have like-minded interests as them. Because oftentimes when you are interested in like these impact focus initiatives, sometimes it's just you in your high school, right? And then when you're able to get more people together, it's like, oh, this is actually something that, a lot of people are interested in it. It's something that I should pursue. So I think community is everything when it comes to impact focus initiatives. So I love that. And the other question, or rather thing that I noticed you said is about you said you did a report and it talked about like how what would the world look like if we center women. And I'm sure four focuses on women under the age of 25, right? Or is it?
Well, so generally we do 18 to 25 for some programs, but we go up to 29 for others.
Okay, perfect. So yeah, young women, and I think you guys probably have a lot of experience or like have had firsthand accounts of what it means to be like a young woman in the workspace, right? Even like a very accomplished one as well too. I think oftentimes when we think of like gender equity in the workspace, we sometimes just go directly towards pay us the same amount, which is really important. Pay us the same amount or more or whatever. Absolutely. But there's so many other parts about like our voices not being heard, our credibility not always being questioned. I always say, I talked to my friends about this who are also founders, and oftentimes, sometimes they're on the call. It takes a good like 10 minutes for them to actually be like, okay, you're the person I'm supposed to be talking to, right? And then we're like, we wasted the third of the call just trying to convince somebody that I'm supposed to be here, right? And that happens to women everywhere in all throughout every position, really. So I wanted to ask you about some things that you're seeing that either concerns you or a focus that you have when it comes to gender equity in the workplace. Like, what are some things that you trends that you're seeing that might be concerning that you're like we should really focus on that for or even yourself want to shed more light on?
Yeah, definitely. Before I answer that question, like you just reminded me of a time when I was at the Gene Augustine Center as its executive director. And I remember I had a meeting with someone and we never met face to face. And so he came to the door, I opened the door, and he was like, oh, is like, I don't know if he used the word boss, but he was like, is your boss here? I was
Mhm.
like, hi, that's me. Nice to meet you. And I could see him processing it in his
Yes.
mind that like I was the ED of the organization. It's I guess I wasn't what he was expected, and
Hmm.
within those situations, it's also you feel like you have to. I feel like take on a more position of authority, just
Yeah.
so even though you know you're fully able,
Hmm.
credible, like you experience and you can do the work, but it's almost like sometimes you feel like you have to prove yourself, which is completely we don't have to prove ourselves. We know who
Hmm.
we are and we know our abilities. So
Hmm.
but in terms of the workforce, I recently wrote an article. So we have blogs at Fora, and so I wrote an article just in terms of equity in the workplace and what that could look like, and what are things to consider outside of pay me what others are making, what men are making. That's a very strong consideration.
Hmm.
Money talks, right? Money is needed. So we understand the value of equality or equity in terms of pay. And what I love most recently about the pay is that pay transparency. The
Hmm.
pay transparency law has been put in place where people, employers now have to post in regards to how much the job is paying, which I think will help. It won't alleviate or it won't completely transform the inequalities around pay, but at least it provides some clarity about it gives one women and gender marginalized people more negotiating powers to be fully aware of what they're walking into in terms of pay range as well. It reduces inequality by just allowing them to, because as this might be a generalization, but as women and gender marginalized individuals, we often it's been ingrained in us to be just appreciative. Just take what you're given, right? Just take what you're given and be happy for it. But no, like we need to be able to have the ability to to fight for what we deserve. And so to have that full understanding is really important. We need to be able to have champions and sponsors, like young people, young women. We need sponsorship. We need people who will really take our names to those rooms that we are not being fully represented in, and really sponsor us and champion us to get into those spaces. So we need that. So not only do we need mentorship, someone to help us navigate these ladders and teach us the ropes and provide that counsel, but we also need people to go in there and make way for us to also follow, or not, I should say we. I'm definitely not a
All of
youth,
us, yeah.
but for you women and young women to access those spaces.
I
Yeah.
was just about to say that one of the things we talk about this a lot in like the venture capital space when it comes to like investment for Black and brown individuals, women, et cetera, marginalized individuals, is that like, yes, absolutely, there needs to be more of a dollar investment as well too. But what happens after that dollar ends up being just important. A lot of times we are not in the same rooms as like the decision makers. We talk about like the old boys club, right? So you could have the money, you could have the funding, but if you step into that room and you're not taken seriously, if you don't have somebody who, you're having discussion and like they second what you're saying or actually even just like looking at you, not under the lens of, oh, you're a girl, we shouldn't listen to you, which might just sound crazy, but like that's how some people actually think if they're actually listening to your words and hearing you and they're able to, that stamp of approval or just to be like, yeah, I agree. That like really, really does help women a ton in the workforce. And it sounds so small, but that's not something that a lot of women have across like corporate nonprofits anywhere. You always hear of things happening like a young woman brings the idea to the table and they're like, okay, maybe we'll table that. And like 2 weeks later, some other guy brings it and they're like, that's a great idea.
Yeah.
And the girls sitting there like, what? Like I brought that up 2 weeks ago. And like it could make that person feel crazy, obviously. And I'm sure it does, but having that ally in the room just willing to listen and also like open up doors, it's just so important. It's equally as important as the money, I think.
100%. We can't do it alone. No one
Yeah.
can do anything alone. We need community. We need support.
Absolutely, absolutely. So one of the last questions I want to ask is about what you think young women could do in their younger years in order to actually prepare them for successfully being successful in the future. One of the big things that we like to ask and try to answer in this podcast is, we know the world's moving so quickly. We know there's a lot of good in that. There's some bad in that. There's a lot of unknown in that as well too. The workforce is moving quite quickly as well too. And us as educators, us as people who are helping develop youth are always thinking, how could we successfully prepare them to be successful, give them a fighting chance in the future? So are there any skills that you think, especially young women, could hone in order to, give them a leg up as they enter in the career workforce? This could be something technical, it could be a soft skill. Yeah, I would love to hear your opinion on that.
At first, I would say that be creative,
Hmm.
be innovative, think big, think big. Like, don't be limited to what people have told you or what you have seen. If you have a career endeavor, initiative, or you want to pursue a certain passion, go for it. And when I say go for it, one, think, yes, I can do it. First of all, like, you have to have that very undefeated, I'm able to do this. It is possible attitude. And then you have to put steps in place to achieve that. And so what that looks like is really, first, that's where that mentorship piece comes in. Someone who has done it before, who can show you the ropes, who can provide you counsel, who can really work with you to develop in the area of your focus and provide you with feedback, right? We don't want just someone who's just like, yes, 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 you can do it.
Yeah.
But they have to be able to actually provide you with some constructive feedback so you can improve upon your craft, whatever it may be.
Hmm.
And then I would say, tell everybody. Like, one of the things I was doing when I wanted to transition from like insurance to nonprofit, and then from risk management into like executive director role, I told everybody, I said, I'm looking for a job. These are my skills. This is my skill set. I'm able to do this. It might not be on my resume, but I've done it in these ways, like through volunteerism, through this and that. And I was able to sell myself to enough people to get an opportunity to interview. It got me the foot in the door to be able to get this my past executive director role. And I was there for 7 years. So I was really able to rise to the occasion. But I told everyone, so someone provided me with an opportunity to apply. So speak to everyone. One thing I've learned, people like to connect, people want to help. So don't be afraid to ask someone for a coffee chat, a LinkedIn meeting, anything, right? 9 times out of 10, people will create time in their schedule to connect with you. But also when you go to those meetings, don't only it is about information seeking and introducing yourselves, but also see what you can bring to the table, right? Like reciprocal relationships are always nice. Like, is it that you want to volunteer or you want to shadow, or like what can you do that you're showing your value and skill set as well? And people remember that. Like I've had coffee chats with some people who just wanted information, but they shared their eagerness to maybe volunteer or to support in another way. And I remembered them. And so if a job came up or another opportunity, I was able to put their name because I saw their work, one, and I saw their eagerness to really pursue their passion. So I think that. And then lastly, I would say is keep improving. You're never, just keep learning, keep growing in different ways. It doesn't have to be formal education always. It's a great way, but there's other ways to just keep growing within your craft.
Wow, that was incredible. I especially love what you said about offering help when you are networking. I feel like for a lot of young people, they make it into such a big thing. Oh, they're so busy, they're older, they're not going to want to talk to me. And then, well, how can I help them? Like I'm just a child. Like there's a lot of things that are going through your head. And I always tell whether it's like our students or we have interns during the summer, it makes them feel good to help you. So they want to be there, right? Or else they probably wouldn't have answered your email, right? So they want to be there. They're taking time out of your day, come with questions, and then also offer things that you might be able to help them with. Like even if it's something small, like you said, like volunteering, which is not small, but even if it's something, they're so far along in their career, like how could I help you? No, there's always ways that we can help each other as humans. So, and I think that also whenever a younger person comes to me and like we're networking and they offer some help to me, I think it also shows a lot of courage and a lot of confidence. And that's the type of people that I like to connect with other people because I'm like, wow, like this person, this high school kid, is offering to help me and I'm expecting nothing really from them, right? So it always just is a great way to build goodwill.
100%. Totally
Yeah.
agree.
Well, thank you so much for joining me on the podcast. I really appreciated your perspective. Gender equity is something that I'm obviously and us at WizKid Learning is really passionate about, and I thank you for all that you do.
Oh, thank you. Thank you so much, Kyla. I love WizKid Learning. Like from when we were at the Gene Augustine Center and you'd come in to do workshops with our young women and girls, like they loved it. First of all, the robotics and everything else that you were doing with them, they really loved it. And I also love to see a young Black woman in
Mhm.
leadership. And so showing not only young Black women, but showing other young people that it's anything is possible. We need more representation in these spaces, and then you're doing that so beautifully. So thank you for the work that you're doing.
Thank you so much. Thank you. Yes, you guys were actually probably one of our first like B2B partnerships, big partnerships that we had. And I really appreciate that opportunity. And yeah, what you do is incredible, as I said before. And I think you, even yourself showing representation, it was really cool to walk in there and know that, yes, this organization is built by Black women, but it's also run by people of color and a Black woman too. So that's incredible.
Thank you.
Thank
Thank
you.
you. Always a pleasure connecting.
Okay, guys, so that was the episode. Thank you so much for listening. I really enjoyed speaking with Emma and hope you guys took away a lot of interesting points on the state of gender equity, as well as things that we could do to help promote gender equity for young women Please make sure to like this video if you're watching it on YouTube, and definitely subscribe to the podcast wherever you listen to your podcast. It also helps us a lot if you give it a 5-star review and tell us who you would like to see in the podcast next. We have a lot of incredible guests lined up over the next couple weeks, and we post on a weekly basis. So please make sure to keep on listening and have a wonderful day.